Basically, one of the deliverables for the Royal Botanic Garden of Kew was a very key or a rather important deliverable, and that was basically to present or to prepare a checklist on an updated checklist for the Flora of Jordan. Checklists have been written for the Flora of Jordan, but they follow some of the older systems, and as taxonomy sort of is quite dynamic, new species are being discovered, and name changes have happened over the last five or so years, which Kew is quite a leader of. So that is one of the objects to do that. Oh, it's not moving. So I'm going to start with some of the botanical explorations that have happened in the Middle East, because without these explorations, we wouldn't be aware of the correct names or the names of the plants that we have today in this area. And why I take the Middle East as a whole is because I am working in the Middle East, and Jordan is very much a part of that. It's very difficult to just separate one country out of the whole area. So exploration or botanical exploration started quite a long time ago in this region, some 800 or so years ago, by Ibn Batayr, who was a Spanish Andalusian scientist, a naturalist, and some of his collections, although there wasn't a herbarium or so formed, that it was not necessary or not the fashion of that time. Nevertheless, his book, which was written on collection of simple drugs and food, but more importantly, the vernacular names that he listed in this book are still used today, apart from the regional vernacular names. The classical vernacular names of many of the plants which are found in this area are still used, and we use them and refer to his work for their use. So one of the earliest plant collectors, or a serious proper plant collector, was Forskaal, who came into this area way back in the 1732. Unfortunately, he died in Yemen out of diarrhea, out of repeated bouts of malaria. But his collections were very important, as they were the first collections so as to record the flora of the Sinai, Egypt, and to some extent which overflows into Jordan. Another one of the similar sort of era, but a little bit later than Forskaal, was Ausher Elwa. He collected in Turkey, Cyprus, Greek, Egypt, Sinai, Iran. I mean, he was quite a prolific collector. His collections are the first from Oman, and that's how I got to know about his work, as I worked quite a long time in Oman. His collections are preserved in Paris, but many of his duplicates are present in Geneva, and his collections basically formed one of the most important taxonomic works, which I will come to later. Ruppel was a naturalist as well, in the same sort of era. Again, a very important collector, but more so of an animal. And everybody who is interested in kind of animals, Ruppel's fox is an endemic to the sand areas. That's named after Ruppel. So he visited Sinai as well and came up to the Gulf of Aqaba. In fact, one of the first collectors to have come over here as far as this region. Gochi, again in the next century, on the sort of early 19th centuries, his collections are extremely important because many of the type collections or the reference named collections belong to him. He was a very prolific collector and collected abundantly from this area. Poaceae, again, collected here, but his basic work was his monumental Flora Orientalis. And Flora Orientalis goes into 5 volumes. It's still a major reference work, and it talks about the Orient, basically all the regions of the northern part of Africa, all the way up to Afghanistan, and Pakistan is also included in that, present-day Pakistan. His collections are in Geneva, so anybody who's interested really to work in this region should really be looking at his collection. It's a closed herbarium, they do not lend out specimens, but a very important collection indeed. Hausknecht is another one, again collected in Armenia, Turkey, and his works are in the University of Vienna. From the later part of the 19th, 20th century, we get to George Post, very much an Eastern, a Middle Eastern collector. His collections mostly in Lebanon, and started the big, a very important herbarium. Dinsmore, Nebelek, and of course Michael Zuhari. These are the collectors of this region and very important contributors to the knowledge of the flora of this region. So some of the earliest floras, I've just listed them because I've been using them, updating the checklist, so basically to include all the names that are given. And they start with Duquesne, 1836, and Dinsmore, a fairly complete flora of 1911. And of course, in this later years, there has been Al-Eisawi and some of the Michael Zuhari's Flora Palestina, which have been much more important as far as this particular region is concerned. Now, coming to the Middle East, now Jordan, as I said, is very much a part of the Middle Eastern region, and it's very important to understand the areas around it to be able to understand what's happening to the flora of this area, of this particular country and the areas around it. We still do not know how many species there are in the Middle Eastern region, but I estimate something like about 12 or 12,500 species. The floras of these regions are not complete. Some have been, we have been going on with it for quite some time. Iran is still not complete. Syria has been written a long time ago, 1930s. We do not know exactly what's happening now over there. Iraq, I'm actually now working on the flora of Iraq, but it's still 40 years old. But we are getting there slowly, but surely we are getting there. And I'm hoping that once the flora of Iraq is complete, then we'll have a much better chance of knowing how many species there are, or at least some sort of a better idea than which is a little bit more robust. Coming on to Jordan, I did not have any climatic information from Jordan, unfortunately, or climatic diagrams. Yes, there are climate data over there, but basically Jordan, as we all know, is a dryish country. Major part of it is desert. But nevertheless, the mountains that are there on the eastern side of Jordan is where most of the biodiversity, or at least the floral richness, lies. That is not to say that the deserts are without any plants. The deserts also form a very important part of the country, linking the Saudi Arabian or the slightly southern type of flora towards the Mediterranean areas, which are the northern part, with Jordan as being in the center. So as a part of one of the deliverables, what we started to work on was to put together a checklist of the vascular plants of Jordan. And this has become really a part of my major project on the checklist of the plants of the Middle East. We have in Kew used a Brahms database, which is a database taking care of the species and as well as the botanical collection. So specimens collections are also cited in that. We use the latest classification, which is the Angiosperm phylogeny group of 2009. We update all our plant names according to the new molecular evidence and what Kew accepts. So this is sort of the structure of it's a very flexible database. So putting down into the Jordan list, we have the accepted name and its synonym. We have its family genus, the species, the actual species, then the rank, whether it's a subspecies or a variety or a forma into that. We have the authority for each and the original citation, where was it originally described, for each of the plants. We also would like to include its distribution, that is the distribution of the plants in the world, so that then we have a much better idea of what's happening in terms of a regional flora. And the TDWG is an organization of taxonomic plant working group, and they divide the world into different regions, and we follow that. For example, 34 is Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, Palestine, Turkey. 35 is Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsula. So by looking at the distribution of the Jordanian flora, we would be able to then form a much better information on where it rests, basically. What is its actual biogeography? We also would like to put on the conservation status, and with that we have the Jordanian Botanic Garden working with us on that. I would also like to include whether these plants are halophytic or not, because this is something that is going to be used as our climate changes, especially in the desert regions, whether these plants can cope with the increased salinity and the aridity of these regions, and what we can do with them. So halophytic plants are extremely important, and this goes into our database. A habitat, vegetation type, and the floristic region is also quite important to know their full. So this is how I see an annotated checklist of the vascular plants of Jordan. The name of the species, its original citation, its synonym, where was it published, what is it like, what is the plant like? This is a bulb geophyte, it's Allium desertorum. What is its habitat? It's found in the Hamada or the steppe region, and the steppe region. Its floristic region, it's a Saharo-Arabian. We'll just, that's how it's found in the Sahara and the Arabian region. These are regions which have been defined by Zohari and then later on by Leonard. Its conservation status is that it's least concern, plentiful, and it's found from Jordan to Egypt. So I'm hoping that by the time that we complete this checklist, we will have all this data ready for us to be used. The actual data that I have at the moment is not final, because I'm still putting it in and updating it. We have so far about 113 plant families represented in Jordan, 723 plant genera, and about 2,600 species. There are many names which are still not resolved. That means experts have not worked on those plant names, and we do not know yet whether they will be accepted or will be sunk into synonymy. But there are several families, as you can see, which are pretty large, with having more than 50 species: Fabaceae, Asteraceae, Poaceae, Brassicaceae. I mean, these are huge representatives, and even the families with more than 20 species, there are several of them. So it's a very rich flora, basically, in terms of the species number and when these families are represented by. Looking at the genera, some of the larger genera is Astragalus, for example, and this really is an influence of the Irano-Turanian or the northern effects of the influence. Astragalus is not that huge in the deserts, but this is the influence that we get, or Jordan gets, from the northern or the Iranian regions. Trifolium silene, which is Caryophyllaceae, Euphorbias, Alliums, Medicago. These are some of the larger genera within the family. The basic frequency of genera and species by genus forms very regular, sort of decreasing. There are fewer genera with many species and fewer, many genera with fewer. This has certainly gone into Arabic. I didn't realize this. Through this, that's very strange. Anyways. Yeah, well, no, it's gone by automatically. So endemism, there will be more on a Hatim stock after this. So there is, as far as we have reached our observations and putting it into data, we have about 106 near endemics. There is one species which is recognized to be regionally extinct, that's Salvia fruticosa. 19 species are critically endangered, 54 are endangered, 34 vulnerable, and 11 species that are near threatened. These numbers will change as we go, or rather as Hatim will go. And I think the threats to biodiversity are very clear. Over urbanization, that's road building, development, wood cutting, which bears the the areas so that there's more erosion and more damage, grazing and extractor mining. I mean, these are serious problems. Very quickly, I just want to take you to the biogeography of the Middle Eastern regions. Jordan, or the Middle East, basically falls in two very important regions, the Palearctic and the Afrotropic. And this is quite in the center, so that the influence is both from the southern or the Afrotropic regions and as well as the northern or the Palearctic. So it has these amalgamation of the floras in this region. The Mediterranean basin, which is one of the Palearctic zones, is a very, very important region, and it is greatly represented in the Jordanian flora. The Mediterranean basin has got something like 13,000 endemic species, and its influence amongst the Jordanian and the regional floras is very, very important. The Iranian plateau, for example, again the Irano-Turanian, again which has some importance and influence onto the Jordanian flora, is again the home to dry steppe grassland, and that comes into this region as well. So basically quite complicated, but nevertheless Jordan is, I don't have a pointer, but as you can see it comes into the IT, SS and the M regions. And these are the definitions which were given initially by Zohari, then developed on by White, and then developed on by Leonard as the floristic regions, or the influence that is there in this region as far as the flora is concerned. Coming or just honing onto the Jordanian flora, the Irano-Turanian, we have genera like Causinia, Gundelia, Heterocarium. I mean, this, pardon me, these are taxonomic terms, perhaps not mean as much, but these are the species or the genera that are represented in Jordan that are endemic to the Irano-Turanian regional center of diversity. And some of the photographs, which I'm sure you'll be all familiar with, these are some of the familiar species that are very common over here, and they are endemic to this large Irano-Turanian region. From the Saharo-Scindian, which is the southern part of the region, there are species, 55 endemic genera are found in Jordan. Not as many as the Saharo-Scindian, Saharo-Arabian, and the Nubo-Scindian. 6 genera and 17 species that are endemic to this region. Found in Jordan, there are species like Anastatica, Gimerina, which is just photographed over here, and some of the other common species that probably the taxonomists are quite familiar with. These are found here in Jordan. The Arabian regional subzone and the Nubo-Scindian zone, these are the species which are endemic to the Arabio-Scindian zone, and these are found in Jordan. Again, these are more the desert type of regions. Haloxylon, which is found throughout the Hamada area, and others, I won't take their names because it doesn't mean much. They're pretty plants. I mean, they're not ugly looking plants. The Mediterranean region is, of course, very important and very significant in Jordan. These, because they form in the northern area some of the main forested oak forests and the pine forest areas for the country. And these are some of the arbutus, Vistacea, Olea, olive, or Ceratonia or the carob. These are all quite important and represented well in this region. Now, about a couple of years ago, 212, there was a workshop in Abu Dhabi in the Ministry of Environment, where in a similar sort of a manner they wanted to update or to make a habitat map for the whole of the region of the Arabian Peninsula. Jordan was represented by the Royal Society of Conservation, RCN, and we sat together for a 2-day workshop, basically looking into the habitats, the different habitats that are there. So this map is available, and from the Ministry of Environment, giving all the habitats which are representative. So it's basically quite general, but in certain of the areas they go on to a fair amount of detail. So Over here, for the ecological habitats of Jordan, is the northern limestone plateau, which continues from the Saudi Arabian, the igneous northern volcanic outcrop, which is number 45. Then again, a little bit more specific to Jordan are 76, 77, and 78, which is the Jordanian forest and non-forest regions, the steppe and the acacia and rocky Sudanian, which are more in the southern areas. The inland plan, the Hisma Plateau, and the Madian group, these are again continuations from the Arabian Peninsula into Jordan. As far as Jordan is concerned, there is a map of Jordan which has been done initially by Dr. Al-Eisawi, and then later on, based on his major report through the FAO, he classified the vegetation into 9 zones, and basically his classification still exists, and we have been following that. I would like to change some of the names of it, but nevertheless, that's really up to when we work further on the vegetation. The pine forests, which is land classification of the mountain ranges in the parts of Jordan. There's also cultivation over there. This is the classification of the pine forest extends basically right through, as you can see, from the Mediterranean region and comes into Jordan right at the very edge of its distribution. So it's quite an important for Jordan itself. Yes. We have the evergreen oak forest also represented in the northern part. I will not go much into detail because Nigel is the deciduous oak forest, again in the northern mountains, represented by several species of oak. The juniper forest, which we had the luxury of visiting in the Dana Reserve, best represented out there. Again, a region, the junipers coming very sort of right at the edge of its distribution over here, as you can see from the distribution map of Juniperus phoenicia. Mediterranean non-forest vegetation, this is the most degraded part of the forest, or the vegetation that is represented in Jordan. The steppe, or the more area which is grassland, you may call it, or low shrubby habitat. The hamada, which is the main part of the Jordan area, represented by the desert and the gravelly and the stony deserts in the eastern part of the country. The dry tropical area, which is a very small part of an area surrounding the Jordan Valley area, where a lot of the African influence is present, suggested by these species. As far as conservation, I won't go deeply into that because Hatim will be talking about that, but suffice to say that it is the mountains which are the most species-rich areas and require the most conservation efforts in there. These are the protected areas which were done by the habitat map from the workshop in Abu Dhabi, and you can see that the whole of the protected areas which are given over here and the transformed and the degraded areas are overlapping. So there's a lot of concern over here as to their conservation. The habitat condition in these areas, the transformed is the dark areas, degraded is the gray areas, natural IU. So the transformed areas are the ones which do have most of the biodiversity in this country, and they have been subject to transformation. Ecosystem threats, again, the forest and the non-forest areas are the endangered. The steppe region and the acacia and rocky mountain, these are vulnerable areas, as were also formed by the workshop. The priority focus areas in Jordan, again, are the Jordan volcanic outcrops and the Madian mountains and the southern Jordanian coast and upland regions. These are classified as the priority focus areas, and these are represented by the hatched areas. Now, I'm not too sure whether these are some things that we should be looking into, but certainly the areas are quite important. They have been as a mention of priority focus, and I think some attention should be given to these in the focus, in the long run. And then thank you all to my team and to the team over here that we have worked with over these last 2 years. Thank you very much.